Hello, I am Theo Lloyd-Hughes, and you are listening to Full-Time Review presented by Amazon Business. Gillian Sakovits can't be here today, so I will be filling in. But do not worry, we are going to have some absolutely incredible guests from The Athletic to break down all the weekend's action. Coming up on today's show, yes, the chaos is back. It's okay, everyone. The NWSL is in fact incredibly chaotic. Just as we tempted fate on Wednesday's show, the league bounced back with one of the most exciting weekends in recent memory. I am now joined by Melanie Anzidei of The Athletic after what can only be said to be one of the most chaotic weekends in NWSL recent memory. Melanie, first and foremost, how are you? Happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. Doing well, thanks.
Yeah, the end of a weekend. Here we are for the Monday morning show. So we tempted fate, Melanie. We did a whole podcast midweek about the crystallization of the top four, and perhaps the NWSL was in jeopardy of losing some of that chaos. And yet this weekend, the league answered back with a vengeance. Chaos is here. Walk me through some of the most chaotic moments of the weekend.
The one that stands out, right, is Kansas City, losing.
Top versus
having
bottom.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
It was their first loss of the year, and it was also North Carolina Courage's first win of the year, which kind of feels very vintage NWSL, the chaos of you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you're right. I think that was sort of the quintessential NWSL game, especially after we angered the gods. How do you think maybe the Courage were able to spring that comeback win against, the formerly perfect best team in the league?
I think part of it is, of course, revenge is a theme this week, right?
Oh, yeah.
So the quarterfinal loss last year, I feel like having that in the back of their minds and not wanting to lose again and to kind of, I feel like, when a team like the Kansas City Current or Orlando Pride, you have these teams that have these targets on their back. And I feel like that worked in the Courage's favor because, you have nothing to lose but to win. So I think that worked out for them.
And there was some sort of both familiar and unfamiliar heroes in this one, right? Ryan Williams, I think, scored her first ever professional goal, which is extraordinary for a player who's been with the club for a number of years. And then Ashley Sanchez, who I think has come under criticism for some of her performances, scores the winning goal in the 90th minute. The Courage were 2-1 down going into stoppage time. So, there was some kind of standout performances in this chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's when you have a game where you have multiple people on the score sheet, it's the kind of soccer that I love to see. I love seeing heroes coming from so many different directions and not just being like the one person that's carrying the team. So definitely something fun to see. And again, more chaos.
More chaos. And we should say, listener, in case you didn't catch that game, Temwa Chawinga came out at half-time, I think, with an unspecified injury that head coach Vlatko Adanovsky did not give us any more information on post-game. But hopefully that is just a precautionary and she comes back very fast. Friday night got off to a chaotic start, Melanie. Angel City 2-0 up. And Orlando Pride came back, and they came back again with a vengeance, showing what champions do. What was the key to that game?
Oh, God. I mean, Orlando Pride, we always think about it, but Marta, right? She had that goal, and I think that's all Orlando needed. It was I believe it was the last 19 or 20 minutes of the game, and it just was, vintage NWSL, reminder of why they are the 2024 champions, and a reminder why they do have that target on their back, even if we did see them lose recently. Yeah,
and Angel City almost the perfect, I don't want to say sort of victim in this situation. That's maybe the wrong word because, Orlando deserved the plaudits for the comeback. But we've seen a lot of Angel City getting leads and maybe giving them up. And this was sort of the quintessential Angel City performance, looking, incredible for 45, 50 minutes. Obviously, that's not how long a football match is. And Orlando showing what champions do. From the Angel City side, Melanie, what do you think they need to do to turn a very, very good opening into 3 points?
I think they just need time. I mean, Riley Tiernan, she's coming her rookie season, so young. I remember watching her when she was at Rutgers, and I was covering the team back then, and just knowing the kind of player that she is. She wasn't in the league after graduating for a few years, but then she comes in and, she's been proving herself. And I think you saw that in that game specifically, especially with the opening goal of the night.
Yeah.
And I think the more time they have, the more they'll settle in with, these new players, these new characters, this new chemistry potentially on the team. Of course, you had Alyssa Thompson coming back into the lineup. So there's just, I think with time, we'll see a lot more of Angel City.
Speaking of New Jersey, did you see or hear on the commentary, on the Amazon commentary on Friday night, Riley Tiernan fouled Anna Morehouse in like a slightly rude way, one of those sort of like you lean into the goalkeeper as they're trying to get the ball out quick, and she was actually shown a yellow card, and Heather O'Reilly, who was on the commentary for Amazon Prime, was like, that's a Jersey girl move.
As something about being a Jersey girl, you have that for that, I guess, dog inside of you in a way. So I think it's a compliment, if anything.
Yeah, Jersey girl in brackets, complimentary. Riley Tiernan, get back to us on that one. Moving through maybe to the game that I think, maybe it was, I think a lot of us had North Carolina KC maybe as the game of the weekend because it was top v bottom. But the game I know that you wrote about beforehand was this newly dubbed East Coast rivalry, or historic rivalry. You can tell me more about that. Empire versus District, sort of the Battle of the East, whatever you want to call it. Tell me about Gotham 3, Spirit 0 at Audi Field. And tell me about the story of this game. Is this a new rivalry NWSL fans can sort of expect to sustain with hype, excitement, and kind of off-the-pitch intensity?
I definitely think so. I mean, you felt it. You saw it with all the marketing and the promotions around the game, District versus, New York. And I just think because of the final game, the last season, Washington
the playoff,
Spirit.
the semifinal.
The semifinal
which
playoff
ended with penalties and Aubrey Kingsbury saving all three. Who could forget?
Oh my gosh. I spoke with her ahead of the game in for the story I just did, and she mentioned, it was so funny hearing her talk about how it was her favorite game and, one of her favorite games, a memory. And she failed to mention in our conversation, the three saves she had. It was kind of like, and you had that too. She's like, that makes it, that adds to it. So very humble response, I would say. But I feel like I remember the conversations around that game when it was happening last year. There was this feeling of like, finally, we've made it. We've made this organic growth. We reached this moment where these games are this chaotic, this intense, this great. And so I feel like having that history now, it'll always kind of fuel the tensions. And I'm sure players and, in the coming years will be reminded of this, or this will become like a story that's kind of handed down generations. And also, you can't ignore the proximity of the two cities. I think that's a big part of it. Of course, the NWSL is a lot younger than other leagues in America, so there's just this natural rivalry of being on the East Coast. And I'm very excited to see kind of these next few games, and even when they come back to, Sports Illustrated Stadium, to see how that goes. Right,
that return leg will be very interesting, and maybe we'll see Trinity Rodman in that one. I think it was a testament in some way to the rivalry that you lose a player like Trinity because she's taking time away with her back issues. There's more on that on the Athletic, but the rivalry that you're talking about that's sort of growing there, and the club and the players are maybe stoking that, like you said, organically. You take a big star out of the game, but sort of Gotham Spirit still feels like a big deal, right?
Yeah, it definitely still feels like a big deal, even though, not the scoreline I expected coming into it.
Right.
Of course, knowing with Rodman not being in the lineup, but then also, I guess if you consider Esther and, the season she's having, or the kind of moment she's having right now.
7 goals in 4 games, I want to say.
7 goals in 4 games. Yeah. I think it's 2 back-to-back braces, if I'm correct. It's just...
Yeah, definitely 3 braces in 4, and then she had the 1 in Portland,
Yeah, it's been incredible watching her. So, of course, I think... And, they also had a recent hiccup, and I think that fuels them too. Like, having a loss, and, you can even say that for Orlando Pride. Having a loss under their belt, I think it kind of gives them the kind of motivation to kind of come back and be like, no, we're still here.
Yeah, no, it's interesting having both those big performances, Gotham in DC and Orlando at home, from the most recent 2 champions is a real statement, like you said. I did want to touch on Esther, though, because I'm sure you saw in the game, she is sort of the perfect villain. She's playing well, but even if she wasn't playing well, I do feel like she's a good derby rivalry player. The way she was sort of, winding up the Spirit fans after she scored. I kind of thought, it was a great game for Esther in terms of that sort of drama and theatre.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we forget she's a World Cup winner. She's someone who lives for this. And also I remember watching the Friday night game with Gotham, and she always has that very iconic now celebration where she kind of does that like arm gesture.
Yeah, that's one for the YouTube. For those watching on YouTube, you can see that we're doing the arm gesture.
Yeah, so something like that. And it, she, after the, in the post game broadcast, she says how this is something, for her loved ones back home who, wake up in Spain and kind of have something to see and kind of like a shout out to them. So it's interesting seeing, her character and her personality kind of like now that she's on this high, kind of coming out more in different ways, and we're kind of learning more about her.
Fascinating. Esther, very good for the East Coast rivalry, the bragging rights and the 3 points. We must mention as well, Jonathan Heraldes getting a red card for stepping into Juan Carlos Amoros's technical area, which, is an interesting line to literally cross. And the ref said, "You have crossed the line, sir. Adios." So, yeah, we've talked just quite a lot about NWSL chaos, and that was fueled around lead changes, and anyone could beat anyone. And to some extent, maybe the chaos of Arsenal-Lyon should be included. But this was very much not what we expected, and a very one-sided scoreline in the end. How did they do it?
I mean, it felt like they were the only team playing at some point, like not...
Where are Lyon?
No,
somebody find them.
I saw someone, I think Jason Anderson tweeted, "Oh, someone let them know they have a game going on," or something like that. But it was essentially, and we were talking off camera how in the first half it felt like, Lyon still had a chance.
Yeah.
I did not expect this score.
You think they could score, yeah.
They had their chances, they just didn't finish them, and that's kind of the problem, right? They had all these opportunities, they didn't make the most of them. And then here comes Arsenal, and they made most of every single opportunity they had. Every time they had an open player in front of the net, they took advantage of it. Every time there was an opportunity for them to just level the game up even more, they took that opportunity. In the end, I mean, we saw the scoreline.
In terms of the more historical, the more emotional piece, Arsenal obviously reach the final. They will play Barcelona, who defeated Chelsea in the other semi-final 4-1. We'll hear a little bit more about that from Megan and Charlotte in just one moment. But sticking with Arsenal here, what does it mean for them to make a first European Cup final since 2007?
I mean, first time in 18 years. That's like a lifetime, especially for players now in these leagues. I think that going into this, they probably were the underdog, No one expected the scoreline. I think that's what makes it even more special because of how surprising it was. And also they're going to be the second team in how many years of an English team coming into this. I think there's some sort of pride.
the third ever since the competition started in around 2002. So yeah, that is not a lot.
There is definitely some pride there. Even if you maybe root against them normally, maybe you'll support them for country. So I think there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of emotion with that.
Just one more thing before I let you go and we bring in Megan and Charlotte. Lyon, the 8-time champions, like you said, probably the favourite, especially after winning 2-1 in the first leg, to reach the final yet again. Where does this leave them?
I mean, kind of how we were just talking about the NWSL. Those are the losses that kind of fuel you. So I imagine, them coming back with a vengeance next year. And that's kind of how these rivalries, maybe we'll see more of that. So I think that it all kind of plays into, we'll see what happens. I think sometimes it's a loss that you need.
I love that. I love the idea that we are here kind of giving Arsenal, all the flowers, and secretly under the surface there's the villain origin story of Michelle Kang's Lyon retooling and coming back maybe even bigger next year. Great way to finish the fabulous Champions League semi-final weekend off, or almost finish it. I will now send it over to Megan and Charlotte live from Stamford Bridge. We caught up in the moments after Barcelona beat Chelsea 4-1. All right, we are now joined by Megan Feringa and Charlotte Harpur of The Athletic live from the Stamford Bridge press box. Hello, Charlotte. Hello, Megan. How are we doing? Barcelona 4, Chelsea 1. Oof.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thanks so much for being here. Walk us through it. So I'm sure the vibes aren't perfect right now, but I can see that the game is just finished, and sort of paint the picture on the scene. We're seeing the first reactions of the players. They're talking to the coaches. What's going on there?
Your eyes are darting to see the reaction. But yeah, Chelsea absolutely battered by Barcelona today. Barcelona just to our left with their fans. They're loving it. They're soaking up the celebrations, and as they should do, it's advanced at fast performance. So yeah, Hannah Hanson's sitting on the ground. She's got her hands over her knees, and you can see, I think she's getting some sort of pep talk from the coaches. Yeah, and she's devastated too.
Let's start with Barcelona then, Charlotte. How were they able to do this again? Go to London and completely pull Chelsea apart?
I think in the first 2 minutes, Chelsea did not touch the ball at all. And that is trademark Barcelona. They love to have the ball. They love to enjoy it. And that's where you try to disrupt their nipple. Chelsea feels gradually they get into the game and really make their presence felt. But one goal, I kind of gone back to see one moment of class. She took it. And from that moment, we knew Chelsea had to score early. And Barcelona, they were very clinical with their medicine. They had their own arguments there as well, over 2 legs. And I think it's a combination. Michael puts our tactics right towards finally, and I said, Barcelona this good, and we thought Barcelona were at their peak and at their best, and Chelsea whatever they are, and that combination is dealt a real in Chelsea season.
Megan, from the Chelsea point of view, it seems fair to say this is the lowest point of the Chelsea season so far, the lowest point of the Sonia Bonpastor era, but is it also fair to say that they may be embarrassed here at home in front of 26,000 fans?
I think a lot of people thought there'd be some sort of competition that would be at least even, maybe getting it back to 4-2 on aggregate, 5-2 on aggregate.
Charlotte, Megan, we've seen this Chelsea-Barcelona European rivalry 3 years in a row now, and Barcelona continue to come out on top. They're very much the bête noire for Chelsea, but with just how far Barcelona look to be ahead as the true elite in Europe, do we feel like the gap has increased between Chelsea and Barcelona now?
If it increases, it's down to Chelsea and maybe not acknowledging where the gaps are. I mean, this season in domestically speaking, I think Chelsea fans and maybe WSL fans have gotten a sense that Chelsea are great and there's no hiccups, there's no areas to be different from winning. But that's not the case, and I think Barcelona showed that. Ultimately, it's Bonpastor's first season in charge, so there's going to be issues, and I think that this is showing that. But yeah, if Chelsea can't acknowledge this happens, seeing the gaps where they are, then the gaps are only going to get bigger. I think also this is a different style of trying to beat Barcelona. Emma Hayes last year played up to Byron Ramirez, very direct, counter-attacking. And this over 2 legs, still today, Bonpastor wanted Chelsea to want to be in possession playing side. And Barcelona beat them in their own game. And they are technically the best. And so we didn't see punting it up to kind of Sam Kerr like we have in previous years, or using Myra Ramirez as place behind. So some may argue you're just going to try and beat Barcelona by being scrappy, and it's not pretty to watch, but you might get a 1-0 or keep the score closer, and then try and nick a goal here and there. And maybe this is part of Chelsea's evolution. It will take time and a squad to develop that style of play. Bonpastor has been quite kind of stubborn of this is how I want to set out, and I'm just going to change it based on Barcelona.
Is it brave? Is it foolish? That's sort of what I'm hearing from you, Charlotte.
I understand her kind of honesty and integrity to her philosophy of coaching, but then I think if you want to win the Champions League, sometimes you just got to find results out and you jump through the hoops.
Any last thoughts here before I let you get out to those press conferences and mix zones?
I think Claudia Pina deserves a shout out. I think she was phenomenal over these 2 legs. The goal she scored today was unbelievable. And I think she's going to be a name that a lot of people talk about the next Olympics. It was really fun to watch us. I haven't watched them live for a year. And when you have vintage Viteas, Bon Matti, she kind of just walks about and then springs to life. Yeah, real kind of predatory sense there.
Well, look, I mustn't keep you. Get off to the press conferences and the mix zone. I look forward to reading all your coverage over on The Athletic of this game and the rest of the WSL season, and of course the Champions League final in Lisbon on May 24th. Thank you both so much. Before we close out the show, did you know The Athletic has partnered with Yahoo Sports to provide free best-in-class coverage of women's sports? Please go check out the Women's Sports Hub at sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. With all that out of the way, yes, I am Theo Lloyd-Hughes. I'm the producer. Thanks so much for listening. And of course, Meg Linehan and Tamara Griffin return on Wednesdays for the deeper dive, big discussion episode. We can't wait to see you then.